Welcome back to our studios here in Lahore. I'm Hamza Amjad, and let's begin the bulletin. The United States has withdrawn from the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty with Russia. The Cold War-era pact banned the deployment of missiles that were capable of hitting targets in Europe. The US pulled out of the agreement after they accused Russia of making a missile that violated the treaty. Russia denies the allegation. 19 government soldiers have been killed in an alleged al-Qaeda attack on an army base in Yemen's southern Abyan province. Security officials claim that al-Qaeda gunmen stormed into the Al-Mahfad base and remained inside for hours before military reinforcements arrived. They say the attackers were later killed, while wounded soldiers were airlifted out by coalition forces. Al-Qaeda has not claimed responsibility for the attack so far. This comes just a day after a missile attack by Houthi rebels and an unknown suicide bomber killed over 50 in Aden. Well, peace talks on Syria have concluded in Kazakhstan with a fresh call for a Syrian-led and owned political process. Iran, Turkey, Russia and representatives of the Syrian government and opposition took part in the so-called Astana format dialogue. In a statement, they said stability in the Middle East could only be achieved by respecting Syria's sovereignty and territorial integrity. The forum called on the United Nations and its agencies to enhance humanitarian assistance to the country. They also emphasized the need to help the safe and voluntary return of Syrian refugees and IDPs. The next round of the talks on Syria will be held in Nur Sultan in October. Well, the Syrian government has agreed to a truce in the northwestern region of Idlib. State media says the ceasefire is conditional on the implementation of a buffer zone agreed by Turkey and Russia last year. The announcement came at the opening of the 13th round of international talks to resolve the war in Astana, Kazakhstan, Iran, Turkey and Russia, with representatives of the Syrian government and opposition taking part. Russian envoy to Syria, Alexander Lavrentiev, has welcomed the move and says rebels should now honor previous peace agreements. Idlib is the last major rebel bastion in Syria after 8 years of war. Beijing says the US decision to impose more tariffs on Chinese exports is neither a constructive nor a correct way to resolve their trade problems. This comes after President Donald Trump announced an extra 10% tariff on $300 billion worth of Chinese products. Speaking in Thailand, China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi said the higher tariffs are a step in the wrong direction. The punitive levy is in addition to the 25% duty imposed last year. The International Monetary Fund and the World Bank say the trade war between the world's top two economies has slowed down global economic growth. South Korea says it will drop Japan from its list of favored trade partners, mirroring a decision taken by Tokyo earlier today. The move has rattled the electronics industry because it threatens the global microchip supply chain. South Korea's Foreign Minister Kang Kyung-hwa criticized Japan's decision at the ASEAN summit in Bangkok. Seoul has summoned the Japanese ambassador to protest against Tokyo's latest export curbs. Seoul's Deputy National Security Advisor Kim Hyun-chong has called Japan's move a public humiliation. South Korean makers of display panels and memory chips stand to be the worst hit by Tokyo's measures. Tensions escalated after a South Korean court ordered Japanese firms to pay compensation for using forced Korean labor between 1910 and 1945. While South Korea claims North Korea has fired 2 more missiles into the East China Sea, the second such test launched this week. Seoul's Director of National Security, Chung Yu-yong, said the projectiles appeared to be a new short-range ballistic missile. Chung urged Pyongyang to halt the tests, saying that they undermine efforts to ease military tensions on the Korean peninsula. Britain, France and Germany have urged North Korea to take steps to complete the denuclearization.
Concerned by the launches of ballistic missiles by North Korea in the past few days. We reiterate our condemnation of such launches, which are violations of UN Security Council resolutions. We urge North Korea to take concrete steps towards its complete verifiable and irreversible denuclearization, and to engage in meaningful negotiations with the United States, as agreed between President Trump and Kim Jong-un on 30 June.
Pyongyang says the missile tests are a warning to South Korea and the US against holding joint military drills in the East China Sea next week. Now let's move on. Sudan's military council has dismissed and arrested 9 soldiers from the Rapid Support Forces in connection with the recent killings of students. The Rapid Support Forces work under the ruling military council. At least 4 children were killed at a protest rally in Al Ubaid earlier this week after security forces stormed in to disperse the demonstration. Spokesman Lieutenant General Shams el-Din Kabashi said the governor and security council of the state will be held accountable for the killings. The arrests come a day after 4 more people were shot dead during a protest rally for the children in the city of Omdurman. Well, US President Donald Trump said he stands by his offer to mediate the Kashmir dispute between Pakistan and India. Calling Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan a fantastic person, Trump said it was up to India's Narendra Modi to take the next step. Trump said he spoke frankly over the proposal with Khan in Washington and Modi at the G20 summit. He said both leaders can get along very well. The US president first publicly made the offer during his meeting with Khan last month, saying that Modi had asked him to mediate the Kashmir dispute. Modi, however, backtracked from the statement after coming under fire in India over his request for Trump's mediation. And earlier this week, US President Donald Trump described Baltimore as a disgusting rat and rodent-infested mess, but the citizens of Maryland's largest city have taken exception to Trump's remarks. And moving on, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson's Conservatives have suffered a major loss at a parliamentary by-election in Wales. The loss to the pro-EU Liberal Democrats cuts the Tory majority in the House of Commons to 1 seat. Jane Dodds, the Welsh Liberal Democrats leader, won by more than 1,400 votes over Conservative incumbent Chris Davies. This makes government vulnerable to a vote of no confidence that might trigger a general election. It also puts Johnson's plan to leave the EU on October the 31st with or without a deal under strain. In her victory speech, Dodds promised to stop the new Prime Minister from jeopardising the UK's future.
So my very first act as your MP when I arrive in Westminster will be to find Mr. Boris Johnson wherever he's hiding and tell him loud and clear, stop playing with the future of our communities and rule out a no-deal Brexit now.
This comes as Britain revealed plans to create up to 10 free ports to boost post-Brexit trade. Moving on, thousands of people have been evacuated from a British town after part of a dam wall collapsed in floods. Engineers are pumping water from Toddbrook Reservoir amid fears it could burst and swamp Whaley Bridge in Derbyshire. Police told more than 6,000 residents to leave the area with their pets and medical supplies. The UK Environment Agency also issued a life-threatening flood warning for the River Guit below the reservoir. This came after heavy rain in the last couple of days led to flash floods across northern England. Most roads and railways have also been blocked by the flooding. And EU nations will vote today to choose a consensus candidate to head the International Monetary Fund. Britain did not field a candidate because it could not come up with a name on time. Earlier, EU members extended Thursday's deadline so Britain can put forward its candidate. Judge Jeroen Dijsselbloem, Spain's Nadia Calvino, Finland's Olli Rehn and Bulgaria's Kristalina Georgieva are the declared candidates. Portuguese Mario Centeno pulled out of the race, adding that he would be available for a compromise solution. The post goes to a European by convention, while an American heads the World Bank. Former chief Christine Lagarde quit after she was tapped to head the European Central Bank. The IMF says any one of its 189 members can nominate a candidate between July 29th and September the 6th. After the deadline, the board will announce its shortlisted candidates of up to 3 names. While Russia has ordered the police to investigate whether arsonists set wildfires to conceal illegal logging activity in Siberia, Prime Minister Dmitry Medvedev has ordered a criminal case to be opened over the recent blazes. Russia's investigative committee says it is probing officials over suspected negligence in fighting fires. The wildfires have consumed 3 million hectares of Siberian forest. Over 2,700 firefighters are trying to put out the flames. The Defense Ministry says it has sent 20 aircraft to the Krasnoyarsk region, worst affected by the blaze. While the Mozambique government and the opposition Renamo movement have signed an agreement to end decades of hostilities in the southern African country, the deal comes 2.5 months before general elections. Now, in 2013, Mozambique's national resistance movement, Renamo, declared the end of a 1992 peace deal after the military raided a bush camp. Clashes then erupted between government forces and Renamo soldiers from 2013 to 2016. The agreement between President Filipe Nyusi and Renamo leader Osufo Mamade has ended a long negotiation process. Nyusi said the agreement opens a new era in which no Mozambican should use weapons to resolve conflicts. More than 5,200 Renamo fighters are expected to surrender their weapons to the government. Right, and with that, we're going to take a short break, but don't go anywhere. More stories to follow. Welcome back. Now, Saudi Arabia has lifted a long-standing ban on women traveling abroad without a male guardian. Saudi women will now be allowed to obtain passports without permission from a male relative. A cabinet decree said passports will be granted to any Saudi nationals who apply. The new regulation allows women over the age of 21 to travel overseas. Saudi women have long required permission from their male guardians to marry, renew their passports and leave the country. The Saudi ambassador to the US, Rima Bandar Al Saud, said the kingdom will also amend labor and civil laws to elevate the status of women. The Democratic Republic of Congo has struggled to contain an Ebola outbreak for the past 12 months. Over 1,800 people have already died due to the disease. The DRC is currently dealing with over 2,600 Ebola cases. 3 out of 10 patients are children.
Colleagues and communities on the ground are fighting the outbreak tirelessly, but we need desperately international community to back us up.
On Thursday, Rwanda sealed its border with the city of Goma for 8 hours, fearing that the outbreak would spill over across the border. The World Health Organization has asked local communities to put up a united front against the epidemic.
I think that after over 1,800 deaths, it is extremely important that people look at reality. Today, if we have been able to make progress in Butembo and Katwa, it is because the population has taken ownership of the answer. People who have lost family members will never say that Ebola does not exist here.
The World Health Organization says Goma could become a gateway for Ebola to spread to the rest of the world. In late July, the WHO also declared the epidemic a public health emergency of international concern. This is a rare designation used only for the gravest outbreak. Moving over to Bangladesh, the death toll from a dengue outbreak has risen to 50 in the past 30 days. The health department says over 1,400 people have been diagnosed with dengue in the past 24 hours. The report says nearly 300 people a day were hospitalized in July. Almost 50 people have died of the disease in July alone. Well, unlike many of its European neighbors, Portugal is currently trying to attract refugees. The country encourages immigration to boost its workforce and combats a dwindling population. More in this report.
A victim of religious persecution, Maury Kamara had to flee his home in Guinea. In 2017, he travelled to Libya. After 4 attempts travelling in a little dinghy, he made it to Europe and eventually to this refugee centre.
Everyone I've met in Portugal has been nice. When you're in a place where you're respected, where people treat you with dignity, where people start to think of you as a brother or sister, that's the best thing ever.
Portugal is an exception in Europe. They welcome refugees to combat a shortage of manual workers and a dwindling population. Portugal has become home to almost 2,000 refugees since 2015.
It's good for our country's economy and for population growth. Companies themselves are asking for migrants now because they help the local economy, whether it's in factories or farming.
In Portugal, almost half of the refugees have found jobs. Deborah makes watch parts in the city of Fundão. A year ago, she fled Nigeria and was saved in the Mediterranean by the humanitarian ship Aquarius.
Life is good because now I have house, I'm working, I eat well, anything I like I can eat now, so I'm very happy.
Deborah is coming to the end of the European programme that helps refugees to become self-sufficient in their host country.
Well, first up in business news, stock markets across Europe and Asia are slumped after US President Donald Trump spoke of slapping additional tariffs on Chinese imports. In Europe, the Paris CAC and the DAX in Frankfurt both lost 2.5%. London's FTSE 100 also lost 2% in value. Reacting to Trump's tariff announcement, investors have moved funds into safer assets, pushing up the price of oil. Brent futures are trading nearly 2% higher. Well, first up in sports, England are batting in their first innings of the opening Ashes test at Edgbaston. Earlier, Australian batsman Steve Smith scored a useful 144 to help his team to 284 in their first innings. Australia got into difficulty before Smith intervened and came to their rescue. But despite his century, day one belonged to the hosts, who outclassed every Australian batsman except Smith. England did all this damage without the help of star fast bowler Jimmy Anderson. Stuart Broad carried his form and took 5 wickets for 86 runs. Chris Wokes, also in great form, sent 3 batsmen to the pavilion while conceding 58 runs. Well, Brazilian captain and right-back Dani Alves has joined Brazilian football club Sao Paulo on a free transfer. He left Paris Saint-Germain after the end of his contract in June. Alves has signed a 3-year contract which takes him to 2022. The Brazilian defender is the only player to win 40 trophies across clubs and international football. Alves has also won 2 Copa Americas with Brazil, including July's tournament. Sao Paulo called Alves the most victorious player in the history of football. Well, drug-tainted Australian swimmer Shayna Jack has pledged to clear her name from what she calls an embarrassing incident. In June, Jack was banned from swimming for 4 years.
The world record holder Jack said she would fight to clear her name. She denied taking the banned substance and said she does not know how it got into her body. After a briefing with Australian Sports Anti-Doping Authority officials, Jack said she will continue to fight for her innocence.
It's been a really long and emotional day, but we've started the process, which is really great, and I'm really happy with how everything's going, and I am not going to stop until I prove my innocence and fight to get myself back in the pool, because that's my dream and I'm never going to let that go. Due to the ban, Jack was withdrawn from the Australian team days before the World Aquatics Championships in South Korea.
And let's have a look at the weather around the world. Well, that was all I have from the news bulletin at the moment, but do stay tuned to Indus News for further updates. And as always, thanks for watching.